Alright guys, this is going to be another game between mouzThorzain and Dignitas Select. This is another one of the games in their series that they played on ladder. This is going to be another TvT obviously, with Thorzain spawning as the blue Terran at about 8:30 on the middle left side of the map. Select spawning direct south at 6 o'clock as the red Terran. Now if you note, these guys are on Metalopolis. There is going to be this short air distance, and in TvT that'll often give a lot of action because you'll likely see pretty fast tech from both of these players once they realize the distance they're in. I mean, most of the time they're going to go for that tech anyway, but seeing that short air distance when they scout just sort of reaffirms what their plan's going to be. It also adds a different element because drops and Viking play, Banshee, all that kind of stuff are going to be a lot more effective, and they're going to be a lot more intense as far as the multitasking. Because if you think about having, I'm going to, drop my opponent, okay, and let's say they're cross positions, so one of them's over here. A lot of the time, if Thorzain was thinking about dropping Select, he would fill up a drop ship, medevac, send it up, maybe on a little scouting route, go around the sides, hit Select's base. But in this game, he doesn't have the luxury of that time gap. Usually when you send the drop, you could even send 2 drops, like we saw in MMA versus a lot of players at MLG previously in Columbus. He would send 2 drops at the same time as he pushed a Zerg, different things like that. Thorzain just confirming this is indeed MLG, so they're not going to be close positions as far as the ground rush distance. And the interesting thing, like I was saying about the rush distance in air, is that the multitask is going to be a lot more intensive, because if you're microing your Banshee or you're doing drops, it's going to be almost instant from when you send the drop to when it arrives. So a lot of the time you're going to be forced to really be quick on that APM, that back and forth production, and Thorzain's really good at that, so we'll see if Select can keep up. We do see both players opting for a fairly standard build. This game they're both just going to go for an opening with the orbital, barracks, 1 gas, pretty standard tech build. We do see Select building this depot in the smoke, always a good thing to stop any kind of drops in there. A lot of the time opponents should really be doing that pretty often. I mean, even in Diamond and lower leagues, you're going to see opponents, because they're so risk averse from the cheese they've encountered, they don't want that to happen. But sometimes people just get lazy, so if you're playing on Metalopolis, always be scouting that gas, see if your opponent hasn't dropped anything there. If he hasn't, that's a really good way to gain an economic advantage. Drop a couple of sets of Marines, something like that. Have a big encounter where you sort of play defensive, stall them, and at the same time go and do some damage. So that's always something to be aware of. We do see that there's factory going down for both players. There should be. Yeah, factory going down for Thorzain and Select. So this is going to be a pretty mirrored build. We do see production-wise, they're both building about the same things. Units, we're going to see that it's almost identical. So right now we're looking for the deviation. We're saying who's going to make the difference first. And we do see Command Center from Thorzain. That is a lot faster than Select's this game. Select has yet to build a Command Center. So Select banking some of those minerals, not necessarily falling through, and there's the starport from Select. Now Thorzain's starport almost immediately following. So something we'll notice there is that although Thorzain ended up building the same tech as Select, and Select doesn't have the biggest gap as far as having a timing where his Banshee could be out before Thorzain's starport's up, things like that, Thorzain got that command center out. So Thorzain's build is a little more efficient. We're going to see Select with a little heavier of an army. It does look like he is producing a Hellion along with these Marines, maybe going to do some pressure. He is getting this tech lab on the factory. I'm not sure if that's going to be siege tanks or Banshee play with the swap. We'll have, okay, and it is a swap. So Select is going to be going for Banshee play on this short air distance, and it looks like Thorzain's doing the same. So both of them going to have a Banshee. Select maybe going to do a little bit of pressure here. Goes up with these Marines, hoping Thorzain cut Marines or units. With this Hellion's going to do some damage. And the Hellion does not get a lot of splash, actually. His 2 shots hit about 3 Marines total, which is not what you're looking for. Thorzain smartly pulls some SCVs, protects his economic lead. Looks like, yeah, he's going to clean this up with rallied Marines. And we're going to look for Select's Banshee. Okay, Select's going Cloak. So before opting for the Banshee to come out, Select went immediately for that Cloak. That could give him a distinct advantage, only because in TvT you're opting to base your detection on your scans rather than going for some kind of observer as a Protoss or, overseers as Zerg. So the scans are, I think, a lot more valuable in that sense and a lot harder to achieve, especially if the Terran's really good at their timings. We do see the Banshee for Thorzain coming in before Select's because he did not go for that Cloak. So 1 SCV down, Doing a little bit. No, just one SCV. So really denied pretty well by Select. Thorzain going to micro around, maybe kill a Marine or two. Select dropping down his expansion at his natural. He's not going to have to lift that. He is the one organizing some of the pressure now with this cloak, and that's sort of what his mentality is. He's saying to himself, I'm going to have cloak out, I'm going to contain Thorzain, therefore I feel safe in taking it at my natural. Thorzain wasn't really aware of everything. Okay, now Thorzain sees the cloak. Thorzain wasn't really in the know as far as cloak, so now that he does see it, he's going to have to just really sort of combat this and try not to lose a lot. He is losing a ton of Marines though. Oh my god. Almost gets that Banshee, but it does get away. Banshee's going to fly away, try to just sit there, always save that, go back in. Raven out for Thorzain now. He's playing this really safe. He just wants, okay, and the Banshee does go down. So Thorzain cleans that up relatively easily, and his second Banshee is now pushing into Select space. Might try to snipe this depot, not sure yet. See as far as, yeah, production, no real upgrades going up yet. We do see a tech lab going on for both of them. They are getting a Viking out for Thorzain. He's going to try to combat these Banshees, stop any kind of additional play here. We do see the Raven just patrolling with Vikings and Marines. That'll shut down pretty much any Banshee play with the range of the Vikings and the DPS of the Marines. So that's a really safe build by Thorzain. He says, look, my natural's saturated, I'm ahead of you, I'm just going to build this extra unit, this Raven, this Viking, and it's going to stop me from taking a lot of damage. Oh, is he going to cancel that depot? He is forced to pull SCVs as his natural, that's pretty big. And, getting kind of sloppy with the Marines. Thorzain really out of position with all these Marines. Select sniping a few more. The Viking is going to clean it up, though. The Viking's going to stop any kind of pressure, and Thorzain pretty far ahead as far as Marines. He's up SCVs, up 7 workers on Select. Select not fully saturated. Select trying to get that gas down at his natural, but it does look like Thorzain's going to have a pretty distinct advantage here. The only advantage Select had in this game going on the early build openers was pretty much that cloak, and although he did get some Marines, those are easily replaceable with Thorzain's economic advantage. And one of the plays I really like from Thorzain is that he wasn't deterred. If you notice how the whole intent and the way I saw it was that Select was going to take his expansion as natural because he thought that he would have the ability to contain Thorzain and prevent him from dropping his natural. Now, Thorzain said, no, I'm going to drop it anyway. He kept producing SCVs, and he went for that Raven Viking. Now, a lot of players would just keep building Marines, try to get stim, things like that. But really, Thorzain said, no, I'm going to combat specifically what Select's doing in the most efficient way possible. I have a tech lab on my starport already. I can get out a Viking and a Raven and Marines and stop any of that. And we do now see Thorzain is significantly ahead for it. Instead of just building mass Marines and trying to out-micro a Banshee, which has much more mobility than you. Thorzain probably going to try to do a little clip play here, moving up on Select space. Select, really smart, really good scouting. Scouts that almost instantly. Kills, Marine, gets a hit on that tank by those siege tanks on his cliff. Really good here. This Banshee scouting for Select, maybe going to go in later, these two, just used as harass. Thorzain looks to be settling in now. He is setting up this tank line in the middle here, and we notice that as far as air rush, they're not going to be able to commit as much to Banshees now because of the fact that this is turned into a pretty standard 2-base Terran versus Terran. When you, and third command center going for Thorzain. And Select at the same time. So pretty good timings by both these guys. Thorzain is about 10 supply ahead though. And he is pretty ahead, and yeah, it's that army advantage. He's up a siege tank and about 9 Marines, now 10 Marines. Select trying to reinforce the Marines, trying to catch up, but he's a little bit behind. And one thing we might look to see him do is try to go for upgrades, something like that. Try to make his smaller army, or marginal or smaller army, excuse me, it's only about 10 supplies, so it's not that big a deal. Positioning and upgrades could be a huge factor. But that's something he's going to need to irk out. I mean, he's going to, out of position. Select going to lose that tank. That was a bad move up. Thorzain had just enough range right there to hit, if you see with this tank, just enough range, and this one actually, I